Does the Big 12 bowl performance prove anything? Welcome in, everyone. We appreciate you being here on the Big 12 Fan Zone. It's the third edition. You're stuck with me tonight. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Hey, I'm Mark. I'm usually here, but for many of you that are locking in on this show with Joey and Shane, you're probably wanting to see them. Well, Joey's got a birthday today, so happy birthday to Joey, and he's taking a much-deserved day off. We got Shane here to carry us on through. We're going to talk about the 8 bowl performances of the Big 12, and we're going to talk some recruiting and transfer portal as well, and maybe have a little fun with some of these crazy bowl names, and they get crazier every year. Shane, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'll tell you what, it's been a surprising bowl season overall, and I'm hoping that the big games coming up are just as exciting as what I've watched. I just finished watching Iowa State, come real close to pulling it out. But I'm having a good time this holiday season. Bowl season's like the sprinkle on the cupcake,
Or the sprinkle on the Pop-Tart, maybe. Some of the Pop-Tarts have sprinkles on them. So, of course,
don't get me started.
Enjoy those.
Mark. We'll just dive into that right now.
Why not? Let's go to
it. Being a Mountaineer fan, you have the Mayo Bowl. And I thought maybe it was just a one-off, the Mayo Bowl. You had the commentators putting mayonnaise on donuts and just really pushing the mayonnaise. Every time there was a break, you saw mayonnaise. It'd be the equivalent of the Tax Slayer Bowl if they were doing W-2s during the break. I mean, they were really just pushing it. And I thought, well, it's just maybe me, maybe I'm being sensitive. But the Pop-Tart Bowl took it to the next level. They had like huge Pop-Tarts, and then they actually outdid the Duke mayonnaise mascot dancing and singing country roads because they wheeled out a toaster and had 2 Pop-Tarts coming out of it. So, I like that their marketing is that they're paying for the bowl, and then the schools are benefiting from it, and I like it. It's tongue in cheek, it's cute, but at a certain point, it does feel a little bit forced.
Yeah, I got to think, Shane, that for some college football fans that have been around for not that long, it's probably no big deal. They're used to marketing and advertising thrown in their face on social media by the second. But for us old traditionalists, Sugar Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Rose Bowl, and there were never any corporate attachments to them. And then even when there was at some point, they were very subdued, just the all-state Sugar Bowl, but people still called it the Sugar Bowl. It was the Sugar Bowl. The Pop-Tart trophy. Now I saw this on social media where the actual trophy has the slits in it like a toaster, and they put Pop-Tarts in the trophy.
And I think you can eat those Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, they actually, I think, just put the Pop-Tarts right in the trophy. Yes.
Now, I'll tell you what, I ask other folks this just jokingly, but seriously, are you a strawberry Pop-Tart guy, or do you like the fudge crazy ones? Or
so just about any Pop-Tart is good with me. So I grew up on Pop-Tarts, a lot of Pop-Tarts. My favorite all-time Pop-Tarts, I don't even think they make anymore. It's the vanilla cream, where you have the chocolate Pop-Tart with
I haven't seen
vanilla icing and the vanilla cream in the middle. Those were my favorites.
I've had the cinnamon ones. They're decent, but I'd have to say straight cherry or strawberry,
Yeah, I like the
not
cherry
even
and the strawberries. Yep.
Just straight out the packet, get it and go. But hey, well, let's get back to some college football.
Let's talk some football.
Yeah, the games. I'll tell you what, all season, I've been singing the praises of the Pac-12, okay? And I want to ask you this, Mark. Arizona looked like a ball club, and they handed it to Oklahoma. Would you count that Arizona win as a Big 12 victory?
That's great question. So it's funny because I've been out of the college football loop somewhat since the day after Christmas. My family came in, tried to break away from that. So I haven't been locked in. Now, today I watched all 3 games. I had the games on and was locked in. Now, the Arizona-Oklahoma game, that's That is the epitome, Shane, of where we are in college football today, because this is a Big 12 show. We're evaluating the Big 12 conference, how the conference is doing in bowl play, which to me has always, before the opt-outs especially, was a great barometer on where these conferences were, because unlike the September games that I love, the non-conference games in September, but they're scheduled so far in advance, you don't know how good these teams are going to be. So you may have the best team in the Big Ten playing the 10th best team in the ACC. So they're not fair fights, where because of the seedings, these are generally very fair, like seeded teams playing. So I always loved this time of year, love the bowl games. But you're right, this counts as a loss for the Big 12. But what's more important? Well, see, Oklahoma, you're done, you're gone. And this is a good indicator of how good Arizona is, up and coming program. Really a tale of about 3 games, because Arizona jumps out with 2 touchdowns out of the gate. Then Oklahoma scores like 24 points consecutively. And then boom, Arizona closes it out with a strong, like 25-0 run to win the game. Really strong performance. This Arizona football team, if people went to sleep on them early, and not a whole lot of people nationally are paying much attention to Arizona anyway, once they lost 3 games early, they then turned into a tremendous football team.
Yeah, I didn't pay. You know what, Mark? That's a great point, because I was too busy watching Oregon State, which they lost. I'm kind of bummed. Watching Oregon State, Oregon, Washington, even USC had some better, good moments during the season. But my goodness, I totally ignored the Arizona until they start winning those games later on in the season. I didn't think Arizona was going to beat Oklahoma. That was not on my radar. I was surprised by their running game. I'm going into next year. You got, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but hey, we'll talk about it again. It's anybody's conference. You got Oklahoma State looks tough. Arizona looks tough. West Virginia is going to be top 25 preseason. You have all Texas Tech even. They have. We're going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal. They did really well in the transfer portal. They won their bowl game. They're bringing some studs back. I'll tell you what, Kansas State. You have all these teams that are from, and I've said this before, from top to bottom, other than maybe 2 outliers, you have a very competitive conference. And I'm not going to crap on the Big Ten, but I am. The Big Ten, you have your blue bloods. You have your solid teams year in, year out that can beat anybody in any conference. And then you have those other teams that you don't know what you're getting week to week. And that's the case with your Iowa States. But I'm just saying there's not as much parity as there is, and I grew up a Penn State fan in Western Pennsylvania. I live closer to Ohio now. I follow a lot of Ohio State. I lived in Michigan. I, went to Michigan State games. I've been to Michigan. I'll tell you what, from top to bottom, I would say the Big 12 is very competitive, and it's really getting to the point where your smaller conferences are taking a lot of these guys out of the transfer portal that are disgruntled, and where they would have been stacked behind someone on the depth chart, second or third, on an Ohio State, on a Michigan, on a Penn State. They can go out and get those guys. Hey, Jason, good to see you. But anyways, I went down a rabbit hole. I apologize. Diarrhea of the mouth.
No, I'm right there with you, Shane. So I'm certainly not going to be two-faced on this. So I'm going to take some shots at the Big 12, and I'm going to push back on a few things, and that's what makes
I want to hear it.
However, I am right there with you on the competitive nature of this conference. From the time that they added Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF, looking forward, my thought was, okay, on the negative side, I do not believe that this conference is going to be competitive nationally for national championships.
I agree.
I just don't see it, unfortunately. And I think that's a real shame in regards to the way this sport is now marketed. It's all about the college football playoff. Everybody's focused on that. And I love throwing on a Kansas State, Oklahoma State football game in October or November. I think those games are phenomenal. But to your point, I said exactly the same thing. And that was even before going to 2024 with Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado. This is going to be the most competitive conference in college football going forward from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we've added those four, oh my goodness, I don't think there's any question. I really don't even think it's a debate from top to bottom. You don't know who's going to emerge in any particular season. Sure, Utah's on the high end, Oklahoma State, Kansas State are on the higher end, but who's going to be surprised 2 or 3 years from now if TCU's not winning again or whomever in any given year? And we've seen, obviously, the best of the group of 5 entered this league. And I think it's going to take a couple years, but we saw that with TCU when they entered the Big 12. It took them a year or two to build up that kind of depth to compete with that level of play. Same thing with Utah when they entered the Pac-12. Took them a couple
Baylor
years
was tough when they came in.
Absolutely. So, wow, it's going to be intriguing from year to year.
But Mark, I'm going to say this. If I were to grade programs, you have a lot of B grade programs from, in the bulk of the Big 12, okay? Whereas I would say a lot of the programs in the Big 10 and SEC are like A plus, A plus programs. They call them, what do they call them? Blue blood programs. They lost the blue. So I'm gonna read this comment here.
Oh, I'm just tossing comments up.
Yeah,
we don't need to address these comments. This is a Big 12 show.
I'm not poo-pooing the Big 10. I'm just saying they've had down years. This year, I thought the Big 12 was going to have a down year, and they played a little better than what I expected. Overall, they beat up on each other. Now, leading into the championship, I asked you earlier, do you count Texas? We saw Oklahoma lose, and if Texas I'm not going to say I count Arizona as a victory for the Big 12 because they're not quite in the conference yet.
Not technically, it's not.
Not technically,
but it's a great indicator.
Paper, it's great. It's great. It's great to see what's coming down the pike. It's like watching a player who's transferring into your program really shine in a bowl game.
Yeah.
But on the same note, is Texas as good as what everybody's saying? And I'm going to be very interested to see how they fare against a very well-rounded Washington team. I think Washington's a good program, and a lot of people are picking Texas to win. I think they're overlooking the fact that Washington is fantastic.
I'm high on Texas. I'm not in any way discounting Washington. I would not be surprised, shocked in any such way if Washington wins that game. I think it's a 52-48. I'm not talking about the final score. I'm talking about like a 50-50 game.
Yeah.
It's barely on the Texas side. In my view, I think they're a more physically gifted team through the entire roster. And I think their line of scrimmage play on both sides of the ball is a little bit better. I think they might be able to lean on them, wear on them, and beat them up a little bit.
Yeah. And you hit, so my thoughts with games like that, and they're close until the third quarter. And then you see all of a sudden it just slips away from the other team. And then the score doesn't indicate how close it was for, 70, 80% of the game. But let's run through the record of the Big 12 so far in bowl play. So the Big 12 first game was Texas Tech in the Independence Bowl, and they beat California 34-14. So on average, we're looking at, this is counting Arizona as a Big 12 team that beat another Big 12 team that's leaving, I guess you could say. But, around 2 touchdowns 2 touchdowns is the margin of victory for most of these wins here. And then you had UCF and Iowa State are the 2 teams that lost their bowl game, but Georgia Tech beat UCF in the Gasparilla Bowl. Kansas, I'll tell you what, I always thought it was a basketball program that happened to have a football team, kind of like North Carolina when I think about North Carolina. And my goodness, Kansas put 49 on UNLV. Now, it was a little farther apart than what the score dictates. You know, UNLV scored late. You know, they're playing, they're playing back really far, just giving them 8 yards to clip towards the end. But it is what it is. West Virginia went into the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and it was 30-10. I think West Virginia left a lot of points on the board. They went for a fake punt and didn't score. They went for a field goal. They missed a field goal. But a good showing overall for the Mountaineers over a good, well-coached North Carolina that was short a lot of good quality players. I think they were short 11 folks that were transferring out or not playing because of draft, being a prospect in the draft. So Arizona and Oklahoma. Okay. And I mentioned this before. Do you count Arizona as a Big 12 school? You know what? I'm going to pencil them in, but they looked fantastic against Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. The running game was on, and I'll tell you what, I never thought from the beginning of the year, them losing those games to today, they would look as good as they did. And they beat an Oklahoma team that was very physical throughout the year. Iowa State lost to Memphis, in the Liberty Bowl. It was 26-36. And then, of course, we have Texas in the playoff against Washington. But those are the bowls. We're through all the bowls except for, Texas in the Sugar Bowl. So you have any thoughts on?
Oh, I always have thoughts, Shane. So my thoughts on this one is, so the Big 12 technically is 5-3 in these bowl games.
Right.
So Shane hit me up a couple hours ago when we were going back and forth on what we were going to talk about tonight. And Shane said, let's talk about how well the Big 12 is doing in bowl games. I'm like, well, yeah, they're 5-2. So they dropped a game to go to 5-3. So yeah, that Texas Tech Cal game, I caught some of that game. I picked Texas Tech to win that game. In no way was I surprised that they won the game. And they were dominant in that game. They won by 3 scores, 34-14. Really never, the first half was fairly competitive, and then they broke free. They were clearly the better team. And this is where I take the next step of analysis of these games, Shane. I like to basically just say, okay, that's a win for the Big 12, but how were these teams coming into this game in regards to, was this a fair matchup per se? These were both 6-6 teams. So this is certainly a really good win for the Big 12 to take a Texas Tech team that, by the way, everyone, remember back in September, Texas Tech took Oregon to the wire.
Right.
Oregon's a top 8 or 9 team in the country and took them to the wire in Lubbock. A really good, I watched that game. That could have gone either way. So good win for the Big 12 in the Independence Bowl, winning by 3 scores. The Gasparilla Bowl, this was a strange one. I watched just about all of this game too. UCF completely dominated the first quarter of this game. They're up 14-0 and looked like they could do no wrong, and there would be no way Georgia Tech would ever stop them. And bam, out of nowhere, Georgia Tech outguns them 30-3 the rest of the way, wins the game. I did pick Georgia Tech to win. They were touchdown underdog in that game, but I did pick them to win. So UCF not looking good against Georgia Tech. And again, 6-6 football teams getting together. So a good matchup there. Guaranteed Rate Bowl. I did not see any of this. I looked over the stats. Jason Bean, the backup quarterback at Kansas, threw like 6 touchdown passes in this game. Just really lit it up. And even though he's a backup quarterback, he's played a ton of football at Kansas. Group of 5 team. I'm not
Yeah.
going to give the Big 12 a lot there,
No.
but
No.
but all you can do is go out and win the game.
I mentioned that before, that Kansas, is playing a team that, and a lot of people in the comments are like, "Don't overlook UNLV," and I wasn't picking up what they were
Which is
putting
true.
down. So,
yeah, they almost won the conference championship. They look like the best team in the conference for most of the year in the Mountain West. They had a bad ending to their season, and maybe a lot of people are going to comment in the chat about various opt-outs. We'll not dive into a ton of that because, again, it's certainly there. And most notably, the game you just brought up, the West Virginia North Carolina game, 30-10. West Virginia was like a 6 or 6.5 point favorite. I picked them to cover. Drake May, one of the best quarterbacks in college football, not playing for North Carolina. I would love to see these two teams go at it at full strength, but West Virginia certainly was a much better team in terms of who showed up. And West Virginia had some opt-outs too. And some guys hit the transfer portal that were key players for them. And so Neil Brown had to take the mayo on his head for that one. But West Virginia finishes up at 9-4. So good for them. Good win for the Big 12. Here's the one I'm going to put a little damper on, even though, again, you can only go out and win the game.
Right.
So the Texas Bowl. Now, Texas A&M's loaded with talent. Very talented SEC team. Great recruiting classes and all that. But number one, their coaching staff is gutted. Of course, Jimbo Fisher gets fired. They've just got a makeshift coaching staff, number one. Number two, they're playing about the most coaching stable situation in college football with Mike Gundy, who's been a really good postseason coach throughout his career. It's a really good postseason record. And this is also a team that went to the Big 12 championship game, taking on a team that, if you really go team by team, is about the 8th best team in the SEC. Right.
Absolutely.
So Oklahoma State really should be playing Georgia. It's who they should be playing if you're going to match up line by line the second place teams. But they got the job done. They won the game. Texas A&M actually didn't have their starter, lost their backup quarterback the first play of the game, and played with a third string quarterback during the game. Maybe the two most impressive games for me, this Kansas State win over NC State. This NC State team was on a roll. They came in at 9-3, very experienced quarterback in Brennan Armstrong. Kansas State, that's an impressive performance. It's not like they blew them out, but they controlled that game. They were clearly the better team. Really good win for the Big 12 there. And then, like you say, Arizona, Oklahoma. For the future of the Big 12, that's a win. For technically speaking, that's a loss. But Arizona really, this quarterback that played for them last night, Noah Fafita, he was their backup quarterback and took over from Jaden Delore about 4 or 5 games into the season. And Shane, a few minutes ago, we talked about Arizona being dismissed by a lot of people, not on the radar. Even before they started winning all these games, their last 2 losses, they lost to USC in triple overtime.
Right.
And then they only lost by 1 score to Washington, 31-24 game. And then they went on a roll. So they finish up at 10-3. So they're going to be a great addition. Jed Fish is a really good coach. They're a great addition to the Big 12.
Do you think they keep him? Can they keep, are they going to, seriously, I don't need to interrupt to go down a rabbit hole, but that's a great, that's something to be concerned about. If you are a mid-tier, and I'm not crapping on Arizona, but they're not an SEC school. They don't have the pocketbook. They don't have the alumni base. They don't have he has a great coach. Same with Lance I don't know. Anyway, sorry.
He is a hot commodity. No, that's a great point. And I've talked about that many times over the last 3 or 4 weeks about Jed Fish. Hot commodity. This game that was just played, that just concluded, this is the disappointment for me out of the ones played so far. I thought Iowa State was going to win this game. They got down 19-0 early. They kind of got back in the game, but they never really threatened. I watched the second half of this game, and I think they're a better team than Memphis, but they certainly weren't today. And so there's a loss to a group of 5 team by Iowa State.
That's definitely a bad loss. And Iowa State, boy, I'll tell you what, when they're good, they're good. And when they're bad, they play bad. There's no, you mentioned Arizona having close losses. Texas Tech, another team that had a lot of close losses this year. But my goodness, I thought they had the ship righted, and I think they were going in the right direction, and then they just lay an egg against Memphis. But
so Shane, we want to make sure that everyone knows where to find your show. So here's the deal, folks. We started a Big 12 Fan Zone show here 3 weeks ago. So you see there on the banner, you got Shane, you got Joey getting together every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, right?
Right. And we delayed it because the bowl game for West Virginia, we do a West Virginia Fan Zone show, and we had 2 shows on Wednesday. So,
all right, folks. So please lock it in for the Big 12 Fan Zone live show with Shane, with Joey. We've got a Big 12 channel that we've launched at the beginning of the season. We've got about 250 subs there. We would love to build that up. So please get used to watching the show there. And I'm going to drop the link to that channel. It's going to be right there in the chat. Please follow it over there. Give us a sub over on the Big 12 channel and join Shane and Joey. Get into the habit every Thursday night for Big 12 talk and every Friday for West Virginia football talk.
And I promise, Mark, and I make a point of not talking about West Virginia a whole heck of a lot during the Big 12 show.
Yes, you've been extremely balanced. Well done. Well done. You've talked more Pop-Tarts than you have.
I have. And we actually spent about 5 or 10 minutes talking about TCU's wonderful uniform combos this year.
Oh, really? Did they have I didn't notice that any more than usual.
Oh, they have like they have like a white uniform, a white helmet, and they have like a metallic horn frog on it.
Yeah.
Their uniform is really sharp, and any football team that can wear purple and still look tough, I'm a fan of. So,
well, once these teams started to go to the chrome helmets, I always thought that was a slick look. No, you don't care for that?
I do, but you got to think it lasts maybe a half a quarter, and those offensive linemen are going to look like they have racing stripes,
Yeah.
Same with the mat. I am a fan of like Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan, Texas.
Oh, you like
Arkansas.
The traditional uniforms?
I like the traditional uniforms. Now, I will say, when Army and Navy come out with their uniforms that are specific for like a division or a ship, or like they did like aircraft, I'll tell you what, I'm a big fan. I like to look at the gear. I bought my kid a Speedflex helmet this year, and it's amazing what technology they have, and to hold it in your hands. But anyways, so we talk about everything on the show, and we'd love to hear from you. I'd like to get heat. If you want to come on the show and say that I'm full of baloney, send it my way. Also, if there's anything that your school has that no other school has, West Virginia has a pepperoni roll. You go down to LSU, you're going to have fantastic food down there. Just if your school has something that's fantastic that no one else has, let me know. And please don't put mayonnaise on it.
Yeah, the whole
enough of that during the Mayo Bowl.
The whole mayonnaise thing on everything in sight gets to be a little nauseating to think about it. It's a bit disgusting. Folks, I've left the link to the Big 12 channel in the chat, so follow us on over there. So what you get there is, again, you get Joey and Shane every Thursday night with the Big 12 show, and Fridays with the West Virginia show. And I usually do 3 or 4 records with various Big 12 media people every week and post those segments on there as well. So we do as much as we possibly can. And we're going to be all over this Washington, Texas game here in the next few days with all sorts of live streams and recorded segments as well, folks.
I want to ask you one last thing, Mark, because
Sure.
I'm going to go through the the transfer portal rankings. And, it's tongue in cheek. I get it. Okay. But
hey, Shane, not to
are,
interrupt, where are you pulling those from? I could put those on the screen as we go through them.
I can't remember where I pulled them from because they changed from the beginning to the end. So I basically, I can, so let me just run through them real quick because I'm going to highlight just a few schools. So Texas Tech is 23 and Colorado is at the bottom at 98. Okay. And what I want to talk about, and Mark, I'm sure you have some insight here and an opinion. Colorado really had the pedal down as far as recruiting and a heck of an advantage. And I don't think they carried that through the year. Like I was thinking that Colorado would be a lot higher based off of the high profile folks that they had. And reports are that, the marketing that Dion brought is somewhere around 90 million, the value. That's the number that they're putting on. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what was reported. So, however, they have a lot of kids in the transfer portal, and I don't know exactly who's coming in or going out. I've looked, but you have Texas Tech at 23, who had a strong bowl performance, have their quarterbacks returning. And then you have Colorado, who has their quarterback returning. And, and then you have your Arizona, Cincinnati, Iowa State kind of in the middle, at 50, 52, and 54. Iowa State's at 54. West Virginia's at 47. Arizona State's at 45. Kansas is at 44. UCF at 32. TCU's at 31. So, I'm just so surprised. You go from 23, most of them are, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I can see that. But Colorado's at 98. What are your thoughts, Mark? Do you think that's it's just Colorado fans shouldn't be worried, or should they be worried?
Well, if you're looking at the transfer portal, Colorado is tearing it up in the transfer portal. If you look at the recruiting rankings, I know exactly what you're talking about here. So I'm going to pull it up. And here's my thought, because I've looked at this. And if you look at the Colorado 2024 commitments, so of course we know that National Signing Day, the early signing day was about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
On Wednesday. And then there's going to be, of course, the traditional National Signing Day, which is pretty much thing of the past, where there's only about 5% that are going to sign. So 95% of the players have already signed in Colorado. Yes, as you just mentioned, 102 in the country. Mm-hmm. However, if you look at the average player ranking, because I was looking at their class the other day, if you look at their average player rating, it's pretty darn high. They just haven't signed anyone.
Yeah, I'm surprised. And then they had one kid that decommitted, went to Missouri. But I see the transfer rankings and recruiting rankings. Is Dion not focusing at all on the high school recruiting, or not at all? But is he not focusing on it as much as the transfer portal? And I think that's the case. He's focusing more on the transfer portal than he is on. Isn't it? Yeah, and here's the thing. And I'm gonna just, this is a observation. It's not a fact. It's just my observation. I think Deion Sanders becoming a coach has accelerated the institutional change in the way coaches conduct business. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, expound on that.
So let me explain, because what would have taken 3, 4, 5 years, I think happened in a matter of a year, with Deion Sanders coming in and really utilizing the transfer portal to have a decent. I mean, he did not go to a bowl game, but they were what were they had one victory, the year before. So that's an improvement. But I'm still scratching my head, because I think eventually coaches, like your Jimbo Fishers, are used to going and getting high school kids, that's what he's been doing for 20, 30 years. And some of these coaches, I think, are slow to, make that shift, that shift into, hey, we're going to focus on transfers. It used to be JUCO players, but I that's just my opinion. Take it for what it is. Comments, tell me I'm full of crap. Tell me why. I want to hear it.
Well, there's a lot of validity to what you're talking about here. I just think that the way to build a college football team going forward is still going to be recruiting. It's going to be high school football recruiting. We are going to know, Shane, I got to say, in the next 2 to 3 years, when people start to run some numbers as to what is a good retention rate.
Right.
Because all I heard on National Signing Day from a ton of people, and I get it, it makes sense. And I understand the concern is them throwing their hands up saying, this doesn't mean as much as it did before because of the transfer portal. How many of these players are still going to be playing for their original team 2 or 3 years from now? Well, none of us know. We're going to have to see. Now, like most things, there'll be a threshold and things will settle down at some point, just like opt-outs. We just thought this would just go crazy. Well, it has settled down and reached a plateau and settled in. And now we see a regression. And actually, some of the major teams playing New Year's Six games have more players playing than they did the last few years. But I still think high school football recruiting is the way to go. And you supplement your roster with the transfer portal. And then the next question, Shane, is what level of player and what experience level are you going for in the transfer portal? Are you going guys with just 1 year left? They're just a stopgap 1 year guy,
right?
Or is this a guy that, and I noticed this last transfer portal cycle, Shane, coming out of spring training, and we're going to see it again after spring practice in a couple months. We're going to see another exodus because these players get to sit down with their coaches, head coaches, and position coaches and get a feel for where they stand. And if they don't like it, they're going to be gone. But I kind of noticed 2 groups of players, at least at that point. One was the group of players that, let's say you were under-recruited, under-regarded coming out of high school, and you really blossomed. You signed at Central Michigan as a 2-star, but you turned out one of the Florida State's best defensive linemen, Braden Fisk, is a 2-star Central Michigan, but then he turned out to be an all-MAC, all-conference player, gets his opportunity to Florida State because he's so much better than he was a couple of years earlier, and he reaches the big time because he sees that as the opportunity. I got to show off for NFL scouts my final year or two, and I want to play a higher level of play.
Right.
You've got that guy. You also have the hot shot that comes out of high school as, let's say, a 4-star, and he expects to play, and he signs at Georgia, and he goes through his freshman season and doesn't see the field. Then he goes through either the redshirt freshman or the sophomore year's spring practice, and he sees the writing on the wall that he's not that high on the depth chart this year. Okay, I'm not going to sit for another year. I'm gone. And you've got that category of players. I just think that the way Deion's doing it right here, I would like to know the eligibility left for all these players. I know the top player on that list, DJ Lundy out of Florida State, is a grad transfer. So he's got 1 year.
Right.
And that's it. So
I think it depends on your program too.
Yeah.
It depends on, if you're, let's just say in Arizona, okay, and you go and you get yourself maybe a sophomore, okay, and you develop them, and you get him out of the transfer portal as a sophomore, maybe a junior, you develop him, and he has a couple years left. Someone could come and pluck him after you put all that work into him. Is it better going and getting a guy that maybe is one and done, or it's an algorithm? It's like they should have, each school you would think would have a room full of guys sitting there figuring it out, and the schools that don't are are at, I don't know what they're thinking, because you have to be able to forecast this somewhat. And people argue that you can't know who's going to leave. You have an idea of who's disgruntled or where you have a void, because these coaches have to be reaching out to these people, and they're not supposed to, but they're reaching out to these players during the season. I have a pretty good feeling, and I've heard from a few folks that that's going on. So.
And this is the first time we've had any conversation on college football, Shane. So, number one, I appreciate you being here and doing this with Joey each and every week, doing the West Virginia show on Friday and the Big 12 show, folks, every Thursday. But I got to say that this is where I'm at on all this transfer portal and NIL era, this new age of college football. For the individual, I'm all for it, because I'm a free speech, freedom of movement, free society, capitalism. I'm all for that. So for the individual, it's great. Now, with freedom comes responsibility, and possibly a lot of mistakes are made with freedom. But I don't think it's good for the sport.
No, it's terrible for the sport. And they're 18, 19, 20-year-old, on the most part, young men that don't know what the hell's going on. For 20 years, I was responsible for, folks that age. So, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, you want these kids to go in and not, the first thing out of their mouth is, what can you do for me NIL wise? You want them to come to your school for reasons other than money. And that's unfortunate in this day and age. They're coming for a check, more than likely, right?
Yeah. I love this comment here from LFG. I subscribe to Shane Joey's channel. Well, LFG, it's still my channel, but no. That's great, LFG. Absolutely. We want them to take
LFG,
over.
I'm a fan. Mark's a professional, so just remember that.
Great.
So
no, LFG's great. He's here all the time. No, we appreciate you, LFG. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Shane and Joey are boosting that channel 100 times over. So that's great stuff. Yeah. Do you watch the NFL, Shane?
I didn't for a few years, but I do now. And I'm on a pick'em show, and I'm actually in first place, but I go based off of stats. And I think that's why I'm doing better, because I don't have the sentimentality I do with college sports.
Gotcha.
Everybody has their favorites, but I live just north of Pittsburgh. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, but over 20 years I've lived all over the United States. So coming back to Pennsylvania, I kind of have a fresh set of eyes. I can, call it for what it is. But why do you ask?
Here's where I'm going with that. We were just talking NIL and transfer portal. I thought it was so cool when Monday Night Football started this 15 or 20 years ago, where they would have the players introduce themselves and they would name their school. I thought that was so awesome. But, and we can all take pride, if you're a West Virginia fan watching an NFL game, West Virginia, well, that's going by the wayside now. These kids played at 3 schools, played at 4 schools.
It's like that Keenan Peele skit where he's like, Montgomery from Northwest State. He just made up some, and it's terrible. Now it's mostly animation, or it's a little carried away. But I don't know. I used to like that too. That was great when they did that. Monday Night Football always had the best, production. It just seems like you would watch it on Sunday and it would be, product day, and then all of a sudden on Monday, you're like, whoa, what is this we're seeing,
Yeah, it's unfortunate from that standpoint.
But hey, guys, I always say I'm not going to talk about NIL, and I'm not going to talk about the transfer portal, but it's like getting into religion, it just causes all kinds of stink. You never know who's right. And it's like, so to be continued. And you're right. 2 to 3 years, things are kind of mellow out. In one hand, I hope there's some sort of bumpers put on, and the other way, I don't want the government dictating what we need or don't need to do. So, and the NCAA, I think in general, is just toothless. So
let's get a hold of two things. And I don't exactly know how to do this, but you mentioned one of them, tampering. I don't know how to get a hold on that, but it's not supposed to happen. The other thing would be, it was my understanding going into this that NIL cannot be an enticement. Now, you can explain to the athlete, if you come to West Virginia, these are the NIL collectives that we have. We're very successful at this. And you can sell the NIL as a whole to say, this is what we will have available for you. This is what we'll work with you on. But you can't specifically offer, here's X number of dollars, here it is. But I don't know how you regulate against, like, the rule is already in place. It just has to be enforced.
You put blinder like a feeder or blinders on, like you do a horse. You just take them off the bus and say, don't look at the palm trees, don't look at the girls, don't look at the location. Just, hey, don't look at the chow hall. I watched that Amazon Prime with Deion Sanders. I'm sorry, guys. It's a guilty pleasure. It's like going to the fair and eating too much cotton candy. It's fantastic. They had a tomahawk rib or tomahawk steak, and it looked like you were on a cruise ship in that dining facility, guys. It was amazing. So, anyways, sorry to go down that rabbit hole. But like you said, it's so you can't it's just going to be bubble wrap. There's going to be no, you're not going to be able to control it. There's no way of really policing it. So you can put it on paper, but they're not going to follow it if they can get away with it. And you know what? I really do think they're going to start getting a lot of additional coaches that focus on their sole job is looking at forecasting, who's not playing, hey, we need a running back. We need, weak side linebacker. We need a left. They're looking and seeing who's going to be coming out, I'm thinking halfway through the season, if they're not looking before that. But
yeah, I heard it discussed during the Iowa State-Memphis game about some of the players that were participating in that game that were in the transfer portal. And Rocky Boyman, the analyst, was saying, hey, I might be old school, but if I'm a coach and there's a player who entered the transfer portal, he made his decision. He's done. He's out, and he's not playing the bowl game. Well, I completely am on board with that. However, I think the coaches are making a business decision to say, if this player can't help me in this game, see ya. You made your decision. Bye. You're not playing.
Yeah.
But if they run the dogs to win another game to put on his record, got a bowl victory. I finished 8-5 instead of 7-6. Then why wouldn't you let him go ahead and play?
Yeah, you run you run the dogs that hunt, and those if they're if you have a shutdown corner and he hey, but if you have a second string guy that's just as good or just a little bit, I don't know. I think it's coach dependent, but I don't honestly know what I'd do in that situation. I don't know.
All right, great stuff, Shane. Want to let everyone know that we will be here after the Ohio State-Missouri Cotton Bowl game, taking your calls here at the Voice of College Football. And again, we want to make sure everybody's on board with Thursday nights, Big 12 Fan Zone with Shane, with Joey, and we want to direct everyone to the Big 12 channel. Jackson, thank you so much for posting those links in the chat a number of times, Jackson. Great job. We appreciate you. And again, that's the Big 12 channel. And for the West Virginia show on Friday and the Big 12 show on Thursday. Shane, anything else before we say goodbye?
No, I'm just happy to be here, and I can't wait to see what the folks say in the comments. I'll tell you, it's been a really fast 3 weeks, a lot of fun. We've done, I think, 4 shows, and it was just to see all the folks that are on live and interaction, and from all parts of the country. So, hey, Jackson is one of our regulars, if you want to call someone who's been on 4 shows a regular, but he's one of them. So
I'm starting to wonder about Jackson. I think there must be like 5 of him because he's everywhere. Jackson gets to everything. He's all over the place. And if you ever talk to Jackson, he knows his college football. He is on top of it.
Yeah.
He knows his stuff. Absolutely. And I got to say, the last text I got from Joey, besides me wishing him happy birthday, was he was wanting to know whether I was going to be placing West Virginia in my final top 25. So I said, hang on, Joey, I'll have to figure it out. But
well, before the game, I said I had West Virginia at about like 32, 33, if I wrote down the teams I thought were ahead of them. After that performance, I think they left a lot of points on the board. I'd put them right at 25.
Yeah, I'm going to have to shake it all out with all the other teams involved. So we do that, of course, after the season. So,
and I'm sure we're going to have a show on that, not a way too early preseason top 25. We'll talk about that, and we're going to break down each week. We're going to break down a team. We're going to discuss and hopefully get some fan interaction. And through each one of the teams in college football, we're going to talk about a few of them here and there. And because you know what, spring game is just around the corner. I know we're not done with the bowl games, but those spring games will tell you a lot about where the program's headed.
Are you rooting for Texas? Or are you basically saying, "See ya, you're out the door, get out of here"?
No, I've been so vocal about Washington. I guess I'd like to see Washington do well, but if Texas wins, so be it. But I want to see. I'm really interested to see how Michigan does. I want to. Every time I watch a Michigan game, I'm left scratching my head. Are they? Is their defense that good? Is this, or is just, the way the Big Ten is? But I love watching the Big Ten, and I love watching the SEC. Heck, when I worked at West Point, I went to every Army game and still managed to go to like games at Rutgers and games at West Virginia and Penn State. But yeah, it doesn't matter and what game I'm watching, but I really am interested to see how Michigan does, and I'm really interested to see if Washington is as good as I think they are. So I would like to see Michigan play Washington in the national championship, but that's just as a fan.
John Kelly, thank you for subbing on the Big 12 channel, and a few others who chimed in that they subbed us up on the Big 12 channel. And again, you're going to get Joey and Shane's show on Thursday night with the Big 12 and West Virginia on Friday. And then again, I do about 3 to 4 records with various TCU, Kansas State, all the various teams, Oklahoma State, and we post those on the channel as well. All right, folks, appreciate you being
here.
Shane,
click the notification button.
Yes. Turn on the notifications to know when we go live. Absolutely. Do that. And we'll be live here on the main channel after the Cotton Bowl game, Ohio State and Mizzou, to take your calls. Shane, it was great to talk to you. Thanks so much for doing this for us tonight.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, everyone. We'll see you after the Cotton Bowl.